From Nashville, this is William Henry. This is Dreamland. Welcome, everyone. Forget about all that negative nonsense you've read in those Illuminati conspiracy books about the Founding Fathers and the creation of Washington, D.C. as the center of a bizarre satanic mystery cult. Discovering the true story, the esoteric story of the mysterious founding of America and her symbolism is far more incredible than conspiracy theorists can even imagine. It leads to a positive appreciation for the potential of the nation behind them and the people of that nation. So believes today's guest, Robert Hieronimus, Ph.D., author of the newly released and highly praised The United Symbolism of America, Deciphering Hidden Meanings in America's Most Familiar Art, Architecture, and Logos. Dr. Bob received his Ph.D. from Saybrook Institute in 1981 for the doctoral thesis and historic analysis of the reverse of the American Great Seal and its relationship to the ideology of humanistic psychology. His popular version of his thesis on the Great Seal, published in 1989 by Intertraditions as America's Secret Destiny, Spiritual Vision and the Founding of a Nation, has been used so widely it's the standard reference work on the subject. In 1988, Bob and his wife Zoe launched 21st Century Radio to further share his research in metaphysical symbolism, the Founding Fathers, America's Great Seal, UFOs, and more of the paranormal. He's been featured repeatedly on the History Channel as well as on the Discovery and National Geographic channels, and he's here now to tell us the true meaning of America's symbols, and his name is Bob Hieronimus. Bob, welcome to Dreamland.
Well, William, what a joy to be with you to talk about this most important subject, because so rarely is one able to talk with a host that knows the importance of the foundation of this country and what it means to the planet, especially since there are so many negative individuals right now talking about perhaps maybe we're being overrun by the Illuminati one way or the other. But, you know, America, as you well know in your incredible DVD, National Treasures, Signs and Symbols of the U.S. Founding Fathers. I mean, you really laid some important foundation work here.
Thank you.
Great images. But the most important thing that I think that most Americans should realize is the key to understanding the foundation of America lies in the Founding Fathers' involvement with the Age of Enlightenment. It's the Age of Enlightenment that is key here. Yes, there were Masons involved in the founding of America, but they weren't the actual designers of any of American symbols. They are similar because the Masons adopted American symbols, not because they influenced their design. And there is no hidden agenda along those lines. They drew from the classic neoclassical images of the times, and that, of course, goes back to Greece and Rome, when we had some of the foundations of a republic. So America is actually, and I don't think I'm exaggerating here, William, America is the birthplace, the seed, the sower of the great seeds of what you might refer to as the Aquarian Age, where all human beings realized that we're one people on one planet. It is the key and seed to a republic which hopefully the rest of the planet will move towards, instead of the types of, let's just say the type of terrorist, fascist, et cetera, stuff that's spread all over the planet right now.
Bob, help us get inside the head of the Founding Fathers. What were they thinking about spiritually with the founding of America, and how did this influence their choice of symbols?
Well, I think, again, I have to refer back to National Treasures, your DVD, because I'm looking at it right now, and when you see that symbol, the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, there is a statement of profound meaning. I mean, truly profound, because the Founding Fathers basically realized that we were not just physical beings. We were not just physical bodies. We had the component, this immortal and infinite component that goes from incarnation to incarnation, learning how to treat others, the golden rule and that type of thing. And the symbols that they chose there were really obvious from the standpoint that most people thought, that when you look at this, that these are Masonic symbols, but they're actually symbols of the Enlightenment. That eye in the triangle basically is Providence overlooking the founding of this nation. We were favored in this pursuit, laying foundations for a republic for the rest of the planet. And, of course, that's a spiritual dimension, the eye and triangle and of providence. But the pyramid is the foundation. It is that which William Barton and Charles Thompson would believe would be the physical embodiment of something that would last forever. And that's what they wanted to do. They realized that we have a physical dimension, they realized we had a spiritual dimension, and they were calling them into balance. If there's one key word I would think of in connecting with the Founding Fathers and the founding of this country is balance. And all of America's symbols, not just the reverse of the Great Seal, but the front side of the Great Seal, the Statue of Liberty, the Liberty Bell, the American flag, all discuss this thing of balance. And this allows me to be able to talk about one of the most important things on this show that I can't talk about on most other shows, and that you're well aware of elevating consciousness, and elevating consciousness in the formula of taking the Kundalini life force and bringing it up the Sushumna and balancing the Ida and the Pangala, which of course is reflected, as you well know, in the caduceus that is used by today, the AMA, but tells the whole story about human beings and how they can reach higher states of awareness. Of course, through meditation, through prayer, and service to others is key, but by using these particular symbols, which emphasize balance, because in this all-secret societies, everyone that I belonged to, amongst 12 or 13 of them in the past, the main thing was about how does one create balance in one's life so that the spiritual nature can flow into the physical body. It's a science, and it is a science and it is a mystical art to do this. And all secret societies have at their base this formula for elevating awareness. And that is, again, as I mentioned a little earlier, I simplified it, of course, through prayer, talking to the Supreme Deity. That's what prayer can be referred to. It's more than that, of course, but the meditation of listening, of being able to hear that still small voice within, which is really key to guiding ourselves. And in that balance of listening and also speaking, we come to the most important aspect of it, which deals directly with service to humanity. Almost like, you're aware of the work of Joseph Campbell and Abraham Maslow and others who kept saying over and over and over again that the hero's journey is the key to our evolution, in the sense that you come up against something that you don't agree with, you struggle with it, you come to your own conclusions, you discover the treasure within, then you take that treasure and you give it back, that information back to service to others in a way in which it's not about trying to make a living out of it. It is more or less about helping others elevate their awareness. I'm sorry I've talked so long on this, but it is really the key, and I seldom ever get a chance to ever talk about this most important aspect of our founding fathers. When you look at Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, you will see he reveals to you about his methods used by various secret societies of focusing in the morning and focusing and doing a day review at the end of the day, of meditating in the morning and then reflecting back and seeing just how much you improved yourself during that day and helping others. It's really, Franklin really was an extraordinary soul alone. There's like very practical Capricornian consciousness, which I think has been totally missed by most other historians who look at his life and don't realize that he was serious about his, at times, vegetarianism, of looking into beyond our physical being in regards to life after death and that kind of thing. So the Founding Fathers, through the symbols that they chose, talked about balance. And that, I think, is what our nation needs to do today in restoring itself in regards to its destiny. And that destiny is a representative form of government so that all of us can work together as one people on one planet. Yep, that sounds a little bit corny, right? I understand that, William, but it's really the key. But because as soon as we get to planetary consciousness, you know as well as I, the planetary consciousness, as we move towards cosmic consciousness, opens up our heart and gives us the compassion by which we can help others without asking for anything for ourselves. And boy, that's a leap of in the founding of any nation on the planet, And, of course, this is, I believe, this is a special nation which had its destiny back with the ancients, whether we go back to Egypt or Atlantis or other lost civilizations. America has found those treasures and is out actually giving most human beings a chance to partake of those treasures. And, of course, it's not going to be easy for people even to find them, especially within the media today.
Bob, we have to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to continue our conversation along this vein, and in particular, I want to talk with you about the concept of liberty as it relates to enlightenment. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Dr. Bob Hieronimus, author of The United Symbolism of America. Bob has a website, the UnitedSymbolismOfAmerica.com. That's UnitedSymbolismOfAmerica.com, and it's loaded with a generous sampling of the book's contents and a fantastic gallery of many of the images that are in the book. Bob, one of the ideas one of the words that gets thrown around a lot today by presidents and other political types is the word liberty. What did the word liberty mean to the Founding Fathers, and does it mean the same thing today? Like, for example, when we talk about bringing liberty to Iraq, does it mean the same thing as it did to the Founding Fathers?
Well, I doubt that very much. It meant the same thing to what we've done over the past 7 years to Iraq. Obviously, I think our president has made a series of bad steps in that direction of war against a nation that really was not part of 9/11, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But liberty, when you think of the symbolism of a liberty, you go back to Greece and Rome and the age of their Enlightenment stages, and we have it manifested in New York's harbor, New York City's harbor, the Statue of Liberty. What is liberty in regards to that particular statue? And, of course, the statue has been attacked for various reasons. Some who feel that it is a goddess. Yes, it is a goddess. It is all about the goddess. And it is the divine goddess. And we're not talking about just male, females here. We're talking about that a state of awareness. And when you look at the symbolism of the Statue of Liberty, what she has in her right hand, she has the torch of enlightenment. Enlightenment, obviously, is wisdom. And this particular type of wisdom is being held in her right hand. That right hand is important and symbolically because it is the active hand. It is the hand when you're healing someone and you're laying on hands. The right hand is extremely important because the energy pours out through that hand. And that hand is actually activating wisdom. And when you take a look at her seven-pointed, I almost called it a hat.
Her crown, right.
Crown. It is a crown. What is the crown? It's the crown of countless ages. The crown is literally, well, if we go to traditional thinking along these lines, the 7 points stand for the 7 continents and the 7 seas. And the great thing about symbols is that there are multiple levels. And yeah, that's okay. That's acceptable. However, the 7 is important in regards to the symbolic relationship to Netzach and in regards to the Kabbalah as victory. What is this victory that enlightenment is embodying? When the 7 deals with, of course, in my opinion, the 7 aligning and balancing the 7 chakras up the spine. Wisdom comes from this process of being able to maintain balance. And we are at liberty. We become free when we attain this higher state of consciousness, cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness. There's so many other different methods of calling it, but it basically refers to elevating our awareness to the wisdom level. The Statue of Liberty has done that. She has this divine goddess standing in the inner harbor of, well, I guess you could call it the inner harbor of New York City, is relating basically that she stands guardian over this process. This is the home of this particular process. That's her right hand. That's her crown. But when you take a look at her left hand, she's holding in her left hand a book. And actually it's kind of not so much a book as it is a kind of slab upon which is carved the date July 4th, 1776 in Roman numerals. That's interesting that it's in Roman numerals because, of course, liberty and libertas, and the first libertas coins, etc., came from Rome. That book is in the left hand. It is in the receiving hand. It is in the receptive. That means that with the right hand of enlightenment, with that book of the date, the foundation of this country, which I believe goes back millenniums. I do not believe that America and the shores of our country, of North America, was uninhabited for, it may have been inhabited as far back as tens of thousands of years, maybe even longer than that.
I think you're right.
If you got a continent, there's people going to be on it. Now, of course, most historians won't agree with that, and I can understand why. But again, with the left hand being the receptive, receiving the energy of 1776, that which gives us our liberty. We become free when we are able to have contact with our soul. We become, it's kind of like, again, going back to that pyramid and the eye in the triangle. You have the spiritual vision at the top. You have the physical manifestation in the bottom, and it says, look, you need balance here. One way, living in spirit is one good way of doing things, and living in the material world is certainly good, but when you bring them in balance, you achieve that crown of countless ages that's on top of the divine feminine, because all of us have this aspect of the divine feminine within us. She is standing on a chain. Her foot is on the chain. That chain, again, I look at as karma. I look at it as being tied to the physical world. The good news is, and you're well aware of this, and it may, to many of your listeners who are used to hearing this, it may be simplified, but the good news is that there is a dimension, a spiritual dimension, in which we live on forever within our soul. And it is what the ancients would refer to in the alchemical formula. It is gold. It is the method, the golden path, right up the straight towards the Shashuna, towards the top of that, when we talk about the caduceus, towards the wing top, giving us our freedom and our liberty. If we feel tied to the physical world, if the physical world is all there is, we are in some serious trouble regards to our inner reflections, because our soul knows everything. It is part of the divine spirit, and being part of everything obviously allows us, if we can make contact through prayer, meditation, service to others. Service is really key, because we're going to need a lot of that with the earth changes that are coming. And of course, you have a whole DVD talking about that in 2012, which I'm sure your listeners I've studied and understood that. Mm-hmm. So that liberty is the kind of thing that all nations need to attain, and that is the freedom from being tied to physical incarnations, to breaking the bonds of being incarnated time and time again. And, of course, the key to that is the golden rule, doing unto others what you would like to have done to you. That kind of balance again. So that's how I believe the Founding Fathers saw liberty, and especially when you get into the finer aspects of understanding what Benjamin Franklin was referring to. He made allusions to the possibility of life being on other planets and life being throughout the universe.
That's what I just wanted to ask you, is that you're inferring that the Founding Fathers believed that America had a spiritual life of her own, and that there is an other dimensional kind of aspect to America. Talk about their belief in these other dimensions and how to connect with them.
Well, their beliefs in it, and you can find this in the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin especially, is his emphasis upon how does one grow spiritually? How does one grow in the physical world as well? And that is, he had a little chart. He created a little chart, and I think I've reproduced this in my book, Founding Fathers' Secret Society, in which every day he would list a group of things that he needed to grow in spiritually and physically. And he would mark every day as to whether or not he achieved them and what he needed to accomplish. Now, daily. this is an old system found within the Rosicrucian teachings. It's not new. I know that he was somehow connected to the Ephrata community and other spiritual groups within, because he published their works. He was involved deeply in that aspect of that, and of course, then there's the dimension of the League of the Iroquois Indians, which we won't talk about. But that spirit, that making divine connection, he was that kind of like the teacher in a certain sense of the other founding fathers, who kept saying, because when we were having trouble in Congress, it was he who came out and said, look, it's important for us to have a prayer before we meet. It's important to acknowledge that spiritual dimension. And that was pretty radical thinking in those days. And damn if they didn't do it. And it made, he set a standard that along those lines. So from that particular aspect of the founding fathers were intuitive beings. They weren't necessarily conscious of everything that I am saying, just like I'm not conscious of most of the things or many of the things that I'm saying. They felt these things through the divine feminine of themselves, through intuition, and they lived that. They expressed that. Thomas Jefferson did the same kind of things, especially at Monticello, and his whole idea in regards to the uniting of the Western Hemisphere. He foresaw that centuries ago, in which America would not be just North America or Central America or South America, but a hemispheric, not, you can't call it a nation, but a hemispheric republic. Let's put it that way. So they brought practicality to spirit, where in the past, I believe, there was an awful lot of emphasis and discussion about this. But how do you manifest that physically? And that's when we got to, and fortunately, the link with the League of the Iroquois, who taught them how to join, how to bring people together and work together, and to prevent war, because the Native Americans were pretty much cutting themselves up pretty badly for centuries until they had a prophet, Daganoweda, who basically said to them, look, if we must become a nation of peace, and in order to do that, we must join and find ways of working together. And they showed the Congress how to do that by bringing out an arrow and saying, look, here we are. If we're just one nation, it's easy to break this arrow. However, if we join, if we link, if you join into 13 colonies into one nation, and as they joined into 5 and then later 6 nations, then try to break that. It becomes more difficult to eliminate a group of individuals that join together in harmony. And that's why, especially amongst the League of the Iroquois, their whole emphasis was upon peace. And that's why they allowed the divine feminine through the females of the matrilineal society in which they were, to have control over the chiefs, especially because if the chiefs obviously were too warrior-like or did things that were against the common good, they voted them out. The women held that power. Of course, that didn't manifest. I think we made 2 major mistakes with the founding fathers in regards to the founding of this nation that they ignored, and they had to ignore probably because they couldn't agree on it. 1, slavery. Number 2, the relegation of women to the kitchen and having children and that kind of thing.
Bob, we're up against another break. When we get back, I want to ask you an important question to me about the American flag. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Bob Hieronimus, who's the author of the book, The United Symbolism of America, Deciphering Hidden Meanings in America's Most Familiar Art, Architecture, and Logos. Bob, back in 2000, when George Bush and Dick Cheney teamed up to run for president, they put out all their campaign literature, and on that literature, it had a flag. And this flag has 14 stars, and It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stripes. And I said, you know what? That's not the American flag. So I started sending it around to various talk show hosts, asking if they could kindly identify the name of the country whose flag is flown by this campaign. And invariably they write back and say, that's the American flag. And I would write back and say, excuse me, but the American flag has 50 stars on it and 13 stripes. Why is it important for us to understand the true meaning of the symbolism of the American flag? And is it a sacrilege for people like politicians to take the American flag and desecrate it in this way?
Well, most of them don't know the history of the American flag. They'll probably still tell you Betsy Ross was responsible for it. And, of course, Betsy Ross had some part in it, but, of course, it was Francis Hopkins, a much wiser person than Betsy Ross. Along those lines it did. But, you know, you're right. I did not pay enough attention to, did you say 14 stars and 7 stripes?
Yes.
Now, that means in the 7 stripes they probably had 4 red. And
Pardon me, 16 stars and 7 stripes.
16 stars.
Yeah.
And 7 stripes. You know, that's pretty outrageous. Because when you take a look at the history of the American flag is the first national flag on our planet. There were no other national flags until the American flag. And the laws that were set down and its approval on June 14th, 1777, I believe it was, basically was this, that the flag, of course, be red, white, and blue, 13 stripes, and 13 stars. It didn't tell us where the stars were going to be placed. It didn't tell us which stars or which stripes were going to be just red or white, because actually in 1779, the ships called the Alliance and others, Serapis, had beautiful flags of red, white, and blue stripes. Have you ever seen that flag?
No, I haven't.
It's called, I have one hanging here in my studio. 13 red, white, and blue stripes. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 blue stripes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red stripes, and 4 white stripes. It also had 8 pointed stars, not 5 or 6 or even 7 pointed stars. So that the American flag, being the very first flag, was all flags at that time were the flags that ships bore, mainly because they had to identify themselves at great distances. So they were all basically sea flags from that standpoint. And it is when you take a look at the symbolism of the 6 and the 7, you and the colors there, you get into an amazing story about balance again. Balance between 7 red, 7 of course being symbolic of the victory in the Hebrew Kabbalah, but also being related to cyclic areas. Mars being related to red, being of course blood, by which our genetic structure is founded in, is more, in a certain sense, masculine. It is an uneven number. You know all of these types of symbols yourself and all those meanings. So with the 7 red, you have an emphasis upon the masculine maleness, so to speak. And with the 6 white, the white has been a symbol for silver, or the same thing as lunar or feminine. You have this balance between masculine and feminine energies, and it's being activated, especially because there are 7 reds and 6 whites. You have this balance between Mars and the moon. This is a blending, literally, and the first flags of America were the Sons of Liberty flag, and they were just 13 stripes, red 7, white 6, and 1 flag. No blue cant in the upper left-hand corner. Just that was the Sons of Liberty. They were making a bold statement. And again, that balance is really key here. The American flag was the first flag of any nation on the planet. It's closely followed by France And both of them used red, white, and blue. I don't think that that's just a coincidence. There's a story amongst these kind of colors, because when you go into heraldry, red is Mars, white is the moon, and it can also be the silver is relating to the moon. However, blue is Jupiter. Blue is the heaven world. And when you take a look at this balance that's going on with our red and white stripes, you take a look at that blue field, and what is happening in that blue field at first was the Grand Union flag. Our very, very first flag was called the Grand Union flag, and what it was the Great Britain's Union Jack placed in the upper left-hand corner, a modification of the Union Jack. It's not exactly what the Union Jack looked like, but most people think it is. And that became America's very first flag. And there's some interesting stories that I know that you're aware of an individuals by the name that were taught that made some hidden contributions to the American history. One of them they refer to as the professor. And
right.
The professor made the statement that, hey, look, we need a new flag for the country. So therefore, here's how I propose 7 red and white stripes along with the Grand Union and the flag, basically saying, look, and as we evolve, we change that blue canton or the blue rectangle. When you get into the shapes of rectangles, you're talking about various types of temples symbolically.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have is this rectangular in our temple of red and white stripes. We have those forces of lunar, Martian, but within that you have another rectangle, a spiritual rectangle. It's the same thing again as this balance of the field, which is the flying part of the flag, the activated part of the flag, and it is the canton, which is the stillness. Be still and know that I am God. That process of meditation is reflected in what goes on in that canton. And at first, we were closely tied to Great Britain. That's why we used the Grand Union. But later on came the stars. And the stars in heraldry, it's very interesting, because heraldry is a science. And,
sure.
And the first stars that we had on our flag weren't 5-pointed stars. They were 6, 8, and sometimes 5. And for various reasons here, but I've always loved the 8-pointed stars. But even in the Great Seal of the United States, as you well know, when we have stars, the very first Great Seal in 1782 bore 13 stars that were all 6-pointed, because the 6-pointed star is a reference to the macrocosm, and the 5-pointed star is linked to the microcosm, man, and in other words, man and the universe, or spirit, which is that which is our, you can call it soul, but it is certainly not the physical dimension, but a higher dimension. So that symbol of the American flag, being the first national flag, laid the foundation for all the other flags on the planet. And even, I'm sure you've seen some of the Russian flags that were red, white, and blue. Whoa, they had some beautiful flags in Russia before it became the Soviet Union. That all were red, white, and blue. As a matter of fact, one of the artists I'm working with now is a Russian, and she was lecturing me about their red, white, and blue flags after she took a look at my book. So the American flag literally is the same kind of story within it that you find in the Great Seal, obverse, and reverse. I didn't touch on the obverse as symbolism, but it's that balance again, olive branch and arrows, with the shield on its breast, so to speak, meaning that in the heart, one can find balance. So heart consciousness, that chakra, the fourth chakra, is really key, because I think that's what the Lord Jesus Christ was about in regards to helping and assisting others, rather than just thinking of yourself along those lines.
And speaking of deified beings, Bob, when we get back from the break, I want to ask you about the painting called The Apotheosis of George Washington inside the U.S. Capitol. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Dr. Bob Hieronimus. Bob, one of the most amazing paintings any American can see is called The Apotheosis of George Washington. It's inside the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. Tell us about that painting.
Well, first, this is a thrilling piece of work by the artist. But before I mention that, as we're talking, I guess I've been remiss, and I should have noted that if your listeners go up to UnitedSymbolismOfAmerica.com, they will see this piece of work in full color. We couldn't get it in color in the book. The ceiling of the Capitol Dome, and this is a 4,000 square foot mural. Brumidi is the individual that did this, and it celebrates the apotheosis of Washington, and that apotheosis is man becoming a god. That is exactly the same process by which all of us go through. We are in a physical body, but we have the spiritual dimension, the divine feminine within us, and what you have here is not just you have George Washington going through this particular process, but he is surrounded by all these Greeks and gods in a circular. The whole thing about the symbol of the circle is so important.
It's virtually a stargate that you see inside the U.S. Capitol, with Washington transformed into a god-man or godlike being. That's what the word apotheosis means, and they're equating him with as a divine being.
Well, it actually is. Maybe they were also saying, look, the achievement of a George Washington is the same process by which all of us become gods.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying we don't become the supreme being.
Right.
We
become deified. We become Christ-like beings or awakened, enlightened beings.
We enlightened beings in cosmic consciousness or Christ consciousness, but certainly higher consciousness. And this particular group of beings, notice that words, and those of you can go up to UnitedSymbolosofAmerica.com, look at it in color. In my book, it's just too small to see all of that, but you see to his left, which is actually our right, Fame with their trumpet. Fame was basically trumpeting the fact that he had achieved this awareness, and he has achieved this awareness in the center of this particular 1,600 square foot? No, 4,000
square foot, right?
This is an enormous piece. And it only took him 11 months to do it, which I found incredible, being a muralist myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how he could have accomplished that. As a matter of fact, he used this fresco painting technique, which eventually will kill you because of the labor involved of the plaster and putting and the colors within it. This was one of his last great pieces because he had bad health in working on this, and actually he fell off the scaffold and hung there literally on one arm, which is kind of amazing process. But he felt so strongly about doing this particular mural of the apotheosis of Washington that I think that he had other ideas of what this was really all about, because surrounding them with all these, what are the gods of ancient Greece? I mean, what were they really about? Were they really about physical beings, being gods, or were they about states of consciousness? Or were they both? I think they were both, because I think that these various Roman and Greek gods and goddesses, with all of their accompanying symbolic elements and colors, I think basically is a reflection of each and every one of us. I keep going back to this because I believe that when you take a look at what they were doing symbolically with George Washington and the other founding fathers, because there's also an apotheosis of Benjamin Franklin.
I didn't know that.
Another piece, and you have that in your own in your DVD.
Yeah, the Apotheosis of Washington. I mean, it's a stunning mural. I mean, just absolutely incredible, with Washington sitting there on his throne in a circle of stars, a stargate, as a deified being. Absolutely amazing.
And look at all the gods and goddesses next to him: Columbia, Minerva, Venus, Ceres, and America. America was also considered a goddess from that standpoint. This is quite an extraordinary composition. And where is it located? It's in the dome of the Capitol. Now, the Capitol is in a building, the city Capitol building, is enormously important because it is us. It is we. We are the people. We, the people, literally are key to this republic. Not as Alexander Hamilton finally saw it. You know, there was this major struggle in America. We almost lost our republic in the last years of the 18th century. From about 1790 to about 1800 was this major struggle going on between Alexander Hamilton and his proposal for a national bank and corporate structure, etc., which basically said, look, hey, we don't really trust people to come to all people to come to the right decision, and we believe more along the lines that the more educated should be in control. And who are the more educated? The ones that have the physical wealth. And as a matter of fact, you find this in fundamentalism today. It's very strange that their belief is if you are wealthy and very successful, God has looked out for you, and therefore you're a good man. Well, when you take a look at the last 7 years, there are an awful lot of wealthy individuals, whether it's from Enron or one of these other major corporations, Exxon, Mobil, etc., but they don't seem to me to be very spiritually evolved. So I don't know how they can reconcile those kind of things. But it is a dictum within certain fundamentalist teachings that they are to be respected because God smiles on them for making them wealthy. Well, that's something else to do with what you and I know is karma in previous lifetimes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not acceptable to those who believe this kind of thing. And I'm really shocked at that. Because I had many conversations with them about this as to how could they possibly reason that certain individuals were so, just because they were billionaires or were good people. It seems to me that that's a little bit questionable. What about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good question, but we've only got a few minutes left, Bob, and I wanted to ask you, obviously, those in the know the power of these symbols and how they work. Are the symbols still working today, or are they being taken away from us?
Oh, gosh, that's the sad part about this. That's the reason why I wrote this book. They are being taken away from us. You know, you mentioned something extremely important, a good insight. 16 star flags with 7 stripes. That tells you right away something. What is the meaning of that?
They don't represent America. They represent some other country, and we got to find out who they are.
Well, I think what it represents is corporate structure. I believe that what Manly Palmer Hall said so many years ago, 50, 60 years ago, we would come up against it eventually. Of corporate power is going to be stronger than any individual power. No human being will have the kind of power that a corporate power or freedom that we have. So that's what we have moved into. We have moved into a world in which General Electric owns NBC. CNN is owned by Westinghouse, so that the news that we get is certainly going to be skewed towards that type of corporate thinking. We have lost our way, literally, from the standpoint of understanding that in order for America to stay free, we must be vigilant. We must watch those and check out those who are voted in and out of office carefully, because it looks to me as if they're not doing our will anymore. They are doing a corporate structure's will, and that is based upon the physical world, that all things literally are physical, and that is the key to, I think, that type of consciousness, the same way as Rudolf Steiner and others and Max Heindel and Blavatsky and others pointed out time and time again. If you divorce yourself from your spirit, you become encrusted and hardened in such a way that you cannot think outside of the box. You cannot think in these larger views that we are one people on one planet. So, yes, we have lost by many politicians wrapping themselves in the flag. The flag does not carry the same kind of power it used to. As a matter of fact, and I painted flags along the side of my car, the history of American flags, and found that as I'm driving down the street, people standing on the corner yelling, screaming, and protesting that I had put up a fascistic symbol, which they refer to as the American flag, as our nation. If we do not move in a more positive direction, the same thing will happen to our flag as happened to the swastika. As you know, the swastika was a very spiritual symbol to the Native Americans and to the Hindus, and et cetera. But now it's been ruined by an Adolf Hitler. And I'm afraid that is what is happening to the America in regards to the loss of our freedoms and being taken over by corporate structure. And I do believe we are going to overcome this, but it is going to be a very tough struggle.
Yeah, I mean, we're in for it. I mean, today it seems like liberty is defined by you can take your shoes off at the airport before you go through the security or not. And if you decide to keep your shoes on, well, America's got a plan for you.
Well, I'm only laughing because that's exactly my feeling as I'm getting on the airport. I feel like I'm in another country.
I know it.
And all the kind of silly things that they're doing. And yet, as you well know, there are tests. People test this process, and they get all kinds of things through, and they don't make a big issue out of that, except to shut the person up and lock them up so that we don't hear about it.
Bob, we've unfortunately come to the end of our time together for today, but it's been an incredible pleasure to talk with you. And your work, it's a masterpiece. It's something that belongs in every, if not elementary school, certainly high school in this country. Every American should have an opportunity to read and absorb and become the symbolism and the power of this symbolism that is in your book here.
Well, thank you, and thank you also for allowing me. This is one of the very few stations and the people that I can really talk to about the heart of this matter. It's usually about other things which are okay, but you having known, yourself what this nation is all about, and I guess that's allowed me the freedom to be able to speak my heart rather than a bunch of intellectual stuff.
And thank you once again for joining us, Bob.
You're very welcome.
Dr. Bob Hieronimus, his website is unitedsymbolismofamerica.com. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. Next up, Linda Moulton Howe.
Linda Moulton Howe and I have talked you to death about drones, but you ain't heard nothing yet. These things are real, and we are beginning to learn more and more about them because Linda keeps getting more and more people coming forward and telling their stories, their astonishing stories. And that's going to happen in just a few moments. Linda Moulton Howe's fabulous website, earthfiles.com, is the place to go to find the very latest on the edge of science. Get the real facts. Linda Moulton Howe won an Emmy for a reason. She is the best there is at what she does. So let's welcome Linda Moulton Howe, Dreamland and UnknownCountry.com's absolutely unique, world-class science reporter. Here she is from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thank you, Whitley. And recently I have received more emails after I put out requests to earthfiles.com, Dreamland, and Coast to Coast AM viewers and listeners who might have more information about the highly strange dragonfly-shaped and moving drones. And recently I received one that is perhaps one of the most amazing reports from somebody who is in law enforcement that I have ever received in my career. And this particular email is dated May 30th, 2008. Quote, I just heard your piece about dragonfly probes, and you talked about people sitting on their stories, about contacts and encounters for fear of being ridiculed and chastised for their comments. Well, that's what I have been doing for about 7 years. In 2001, I was on my parents' land in southern Ohio, about an hour north of Cincinnati. It was early morning, about 8:30 a.m. in mid-December 2001. I had been out hunting on my parents' land, where there were a lot of Douglas fir trees that ran about a half mile and about 300 yards deep. The deer I was hunting frequented that stand of fir trees, so I routinely went to sit among the trees every hunting season. When I entered the stand of trees to head to my normal spot, I felt a strange sensation, like a static charge enveloped my body, unquote. That Ohio hunter has asked for anonymity because he now works in law enforcement and does not want to jeopardize his employment. So I will call him David Smith. David was born in 1982 and is now 26 years old. The past 4 years he has worked as a police dispatcher in a southwestern state. He told me that he is haunted by what happened to him in that southern Ohio stand of fir trees in December 2001. He vividly remembers a ring with 3 long antennae suspended in the air at treetop height. It had snowed the night before, and apparently the strange aerial ring was interested in that new snow. A perfect circle had been melted on the ground that included melting snow on fir tree branches that hung inside the circle. The snow droplets were rising in a translucent column of energy into the completely silent, hovering aerial ring with its 3 long appendages.
I walked probably 10 or 15 feet into the tree line, and I heard this sound. It's very hard to explain, but it would start from the lowest bass that the human ear can pick up, and it would rise 4 or 5, maybe even 6 octaves to a very high-pitched note, and it would do it every 15 seconds. So it would rise from bass to high pitch, and then back down to bass, and it would start the process over again. This was not natural. This was not an animal. It was not man-made. I need to find out what this is. So I started walking in the general direction that I figured it would be, and I remember that the sound never changed. The sound stayed the same volume that it was when I first heard it. Like it was the same distance away from me, even though I was walking closer. I remember looking ahead of me and seeing a tree that the snow on top of it was partially melted. It was wet snow. And the tree directly after it, the snow was a little bit more melted. It wasn't gone, but it was still kind of there. It was very wet. And then I remember the tree after it was hardly any snow at all. It was mainly on the bottom needles. And then I remember vividly the tree after it was devoid of snow and completely dry. This was the case for all of the trees that I could see in front of me on both sides of the row. I would assume it would carry forth to all the trees in a circle. I remember this being incredibly puzzling. As I walked forward to inspect the trees, I put my head down below the limb line, and I remember looking under the trees and seeing that there was a perfect circle cut in the snow, as though someone had taken a knife and just cut out a perfect circle of snow, and all that lay there was grass. So I proceeded to walk forward. When I raised my head up between the limbs, I saw something that is very, very hard for me to explain. I saw what I assumed was the snow from this missing circle in the ground. It was floating in droplet form. It was animated. I could see movement in the droplet. I do recall seeing some sunlight played on the droplets. As I looked up the column that stretched, I would say, 5 to 8 feet up from the ground, I noticed that it got heavier as I went up. So very few droplets at the bottom. At the top of the column, there were millions of droplets, very full. And 10 feet above that, for the first time, saw the object. The sound had stopped, almost like it realized someone was there looking at it. I just remember that the sound did stop as I walked in through the trees. After looking up past the column, seeing the object for the first time, it was very awe-inspiring at first. Very much like that small feeling you get when looking at large buildings. That was the feeling I got, was, wow, I'm incredibly puny compared to this thing. Not that it was large, because it wasn't. I would estimate the diameter of the inner ring of the object to be maybe 10, maybe 12 feet wide. There were 3 antennas. I call them antennas, but they were very thick. The ring diameter was probably foot thick to 2 feet thick. The antenna that I saw, there were 3 of them. They were equidistant apart. They were probably 20 feet long. They were huge. Where the antenna actually met the ring, I couldn't tell any sort of coupling. I couldn't tell any sort of anchoring system. It looked like they were molded into the piece, and it all made one piece. There was absolutely no crack where they were anchored. There were no bolts, no obvious anchoring mechanisms, but they were incredibly taut. They were 100% straight. There was no bow to them.
Where were they coming off of the ring? Were they together, or were they equidistant around the ring?
They were equidistant around the ring.
Can you place in a north, south, east, west on the ring where each of these 3 20-foot long antennae were?
I would have been pointing west So those antennae on that ring, one would have been pointed exactly due north, and then the other two, I would guess, were going to be pointed southwest and southeast.
And were they tapering to the very end and tip of each of those antennae?
They tapered. They came to the points. They were so small and so pointy that it actually blended in with the background. So where it came to a point, I couldn't actually see the point. The material, I assume it was metal, this thing was constructed out of was nothing I've ever seen before. It was 100% smooth and very deep, as in when you would look at it, it was like it absorbed light. It was almost as though it sucked in light around itself. But it was a charcoal gray, very, very shiny, and I saw no reflection. It was shiny yet matte, if that makes any sense. I saw no reflections in it. I couldn't see myself or the surrounding trees. On the ends of the antennas, there were 4 rods that looked like FM radio antennas.
You're saying that crossing each of those ends were straight pieces of rods that made 90-degree angles to the long antenna?
Not 90, they probably made 35-degree angles. They were pointed semi-diagonally upwards. I would guess a good 3 minutes had passed, with no movement, no sound. The only thing that I can still recall vividly from this point on is that the droplets had stopped moving. They were still floating in space above this area. They are very large trees. These things are huge. And the limbs extend. They only leave a good 1.5 to 2 feet worth of clearance walking between them. So it's a big deal for that much snow to be gone.
How tall are those trees?
The object was hovering right above one, like it was almost touching one of the tips of the trees. I would say it was probably 20 to 25 feet off the ground. Those trees are about 20 to 25 feet tall.
And you are how tall?
I'm 6'4".
So the object itself was only about 14 feet above you.
Exactly. I got a very, very good look at it. The good thing is that nothing was obscured by the trees themselves. So I could see the whole ring. I could see all the antenna arrayed around its body. I vividly remember that when I would try to look at it, it would instantly, within a second or two of me looking at it directly, there would be a field around the ring that would appear that looked like heat waves. When I would first look at it, it would be just a ring. This field would just automatically appear, and it would just be waves, like heat waves coming off a hot road in the desert. The next thing I remember is looking at it and staring at the ring itself, trying to get some sort of characteristics from it, some sort of writing or inscription or anything, where there was a metal panel or something, and I just couldn't find one. I remember intently thinking to myself, what is this thing? I've got to find out what this is. And as soon as I did that, I was overcome with the most frightening fear I've ever had in my life. The most horrifying fear that you could ever imagine hit me very hard. So much so that my body tensed. I tensed up so tight that I couldn't move. It was like I'd lost control of my body. My brain was in fight or flight mode, and it was telling me to flee very quickly, but I couldn't. I was stuck in place. And this lasted for, I would say, 15 to 20 seconds. I don't know what happened to the water, the floating droplets of water. I do not know. I was very intent on the ring itself. I couldn't look away to tell what had happened to it. The next thing that I can recall happening is that as the fear progressed, as it got worse, I actually started to cry. I remember the warmth of my tears on my cold cheeks. And the last thing of the whole encounter that I really remember is the fact that it went from no movement, no sound, no nothing, instantly to spinning. It was amazingly fast how fast this thing was going. Spinning right in place in a circle. There was no wind generated from it. It was spinning incredibly fast. As I was looking at the ring and it's spinning, I remember seeing a white pinpoint of light developing right in the center of the ring, right where I was looking. Not in the center space, but in the center of the body of the ring. So if I was looking at the body of the ring itself spinning, right in the middle of that body develops this pinpoint of brilliant white light. As I stared at it, it got larger and larger, and then in an instant it exploded and it just enveloped my eyesight. I relate it to like reverse tunnel vision. When you have tunnel vision, everything goes from the outside in. Well, this went from the inside out and enveloped my vision. When it exploded into my sight, it knocked me unconscious. I woke up, I would guess, 10 hours later. The sun was down. It was night. My watch had stopped, so I can't give you an accurate time. I still have the stopwatch. I was laying on the ground on my back, and I remember feeling very disoriented when I woke up, almost to the point of not remembering what happened. The weirdest thing about it was that the soles of my boots had been melted. The rubber on the soles of the boots, it was melted. It was grass, and it was horrible. There were 2 footprints in the snow where my feet had been, and in those footprints, there was no snow. There was just grass underneath where I'd been standing. Obviously, the melting of the boot soles would burn me through the snow into the grass, but there were no burn marks in the ground. It was almost like I'd been struck by lightning. I felt very disoriented. My body hurt all over. I couldn't think very well. I was lost, actually. I couldn't figure out where I was. I sat there for half an hour, 45 minutes, just trying to figure out who I was, where I was, and what I was doing. It was very, very frightening.
Did you get any sense of communication in your mind from this object when it was spinning and when that light began to appear?
The only thing I felt when it started spinning was just pure hatred. I got this overwhelming feeling of, I hate you. Like, why are you here? Like, leave me alone. Why are you alive? That kind of thing. I come from a military family, and I've seen a lot of military hardware that performs very well, but I've never seen any piece of metallic hardware perform that kind of a maneuver in our atmosphere.
Spinning so rapidly and not causing any movement in the air around you.
Or any sound. Try to imagine seeing a ring spinning, right, in air with the antennas attached, but absolutely no air movement, absolutely no sound from air movement. No whoosh, no ka-whoosh, nothing. Just complete silence.
And was it during that spinning that you had this sense that it was directing hatred at you?
When it started spinning like that, I genuinely believe it wanted my death.
And if it were that powerful, and from someplace else in the universe perhaps, why do you think you were not killed?
I don't think it had the capability. Using everything that I know to be valid in the world of physics and the world of chemistry as we know it, I don't think it had the capability to do it.
But that it was expressing to your mind somehow that it wanted you eliminated.
Exactly. I feel that it was expressing its emotions, if I dare use the word emotion. I don't know where it was from, of course. I definitely do not believe that it was man-made. There's a lot of stuff out there I know that can be man-made, but this was not. This was completely otherworldly, and I do not believe that it had the capability to kill me. What it was doing was expressing its desire to do so.
And when that white, bright pinpoint of light began to expand, did you have any other sense coming from the spinning object?
It was almost as though I was in a trance. My vision had been locked upon it. I do remember thinking I'm going to die. I remember thinking that this is it. I'm toast. Like, I'm done. I believe it tried to kill me and it failed somehow. It didn't perform something right or do something correctly. Or it was just a defensive tactic. Or it was an object that was sent here. What I got from looking at it, from stumbling upon it in the middle of nowhere, was that it was on some sort of covert operation. My main objective is to not be discovered. That's what I get from the whole situation, is that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I stumbled upon the wrong thing at the wrong time.
And you could say from what you observed that its mission at that time was to gather the snow in a melted form into that energy column and take it somewhere into that ring?
Yes. I thoroughly believe that it was studying something, whether it be the snow or whether the snow was just the top layer and it was trying to get to the dirt. Maybe there's something buried under there. I don't know. I've never gone back. I refuse to go back. I will not go back into that area. That's how frightening this was. I'm scared thinking about it right now.
And when you heard my discussion and heard Brent Yarrow up in Camas, Washington, describing what he and his friend had seen, what was your reaction?
To tell you the truth, and I'm not afraid to admit this, I broke down crying. I was very glad to hear that I wasn't the only one that had heard about this stuff. I wasn't the only one that had seen one of these things. I'm very, very scared of it coming back. I feel that its purpose was not good in nature. Something big is going to happen. I'm fairly certain of that.
David Smith is now the 16th eyewitness spanning 21 years who have described a long wingless body around a ring with
these antennae, sometimes 3, sometimes more, in these odd positions around the ring. And in 2007, in addition to the ring and the antenna, it was very clear that a series of photographs also showed this corona of wires that went up from the ring, which were not in this 2001 mid-December description by David Smith. But of all of them that have seen this strange dragonfly moving and wingless body in the sky that I have talked to personally, every single one has said, I felt like I was being watched. I felt that it knew what I was thinking. I felt like I was under surveillance. Whatever this is, Whitley, the very fact that this man 7 years ago would also have intuitively the sense of an emotion that he related to hatred and a desire to kill him watching it is perhaps the most sobering and most dangerous insight that we've had yet on these dragonfly drones.
Charitable giving is important not only to the needy, but also to those of us doing the giving. That's why Unknown Country and Dreamland have adopted the Mercy Corps as a favorite charity. As large as Mercy Corps is, it's still a very lean operation, so 89% of your contribution goes directly into the hands of the needy. When children are hungry, Mercy Corps is there. When people are freezing or flooded out or suffering from disease, Mercy Corps is there. You can be there too. Go to mercycorps.org to get started.
Linda, I think that is the most incredible, powerful, single interview about a UFO sighting that I have ever heard. I don't recall, in all of my career, ever hearing anyone speak that with that articulation, with that sincerity, with that skill in terms of observation of detail and self-knowledge about one of these events. And I will tell you that certain things about what he said, and I'll be very specific. We're fortunate. We have a little time today. We have about 15 minutes to go.
Okay.
10 or 15 minutes. So I don't know exactly how many because I'm not good enough with numbers. But anyway, the emotions that he experienced are so familiar. I became aware of the fact that the visitors could project fear while I was actually, when I would get close to them out in the woods, sometimes I would know it. Not because I had seen them or could see them, but because they gave themselves away by my suddenly becoming completely suffused with the most appalling fear I can imagine. And then I would know they were nearby, and and that they were afraid I was aware of their presence. And I also knew another thing, that they could not tell whether or not I knew they were there, which was fascinating and very informative. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given themselves away, right?
And it sounds like the zones of fear that John Keel wrote about in his very important books from the 1960s, such as The Haunted Planet.
Absolutely. But the other thing, and the thing that makes this so remarkable, is the hate that he felt.
Right.
I have felt that too, once or twice. And at the same time, I felt also that I was in the wrong place and that something hated me, or in my case, something I could see quite clearly, hated me for being there. And I thought afterwards, when it happened to me, that perhaps that hatred came from the fact that this being was going to suffer consequences because it had stumbled and revealed itself when that was not something it should have done. And that was where the hatred came from. But I agree with him wholeheartedly. There's a sense that something is about to happen here. That when I say about, I don't mean tomorrow, but I do mean something like this. Say 1 million years ago, some extraordinary advanced species sent scouts out, not necessarily living beings, but creatures so advanced biomechanically that they might as well be living beings, extraordinarily advanced machines, and sent thousands of them, millions of them out across the universe or just across the galaxy. And some of these machines found us. They might have sent signals back, but it might be quite a long time before the main body arrives. Because if they don't travel if they can't move instantaneously, and they're not somehow from another near dimension that's right on top of us, maybe they're crossing the universe or crossing the galaxy much more slowly, much faster than we can imagine, but far more slowly than we would assume. And maybe what we're seeing now is gradually coming into more and more focus because more and more of them are arriving. And the drones, to me, represent a sea change. These are the clearest, biggest, most clearly definable alien objects that we've seen. And to say that they are of human manufacture is also, therefore, to say that there is an element of human society that is capable of functioning and manufacturing things that are literally light years beyond the technology that's known in the public sector. And while I know the technology behind the curtain of classification is some of it profoundly advanced, I think he's right about this not being of this world.
I was just going to say, he's not describing something that was made by man, just as Ricky Sorrells was not describing anything made by man that was so huge over his forest in Texas, in Dublin in January, where he had gone deer hunting and found that thing above him. And when I asked David Smith about what he intuited perhaps could be the reason about this translucent cone, you and I know it as being a beam technology. I know people in our government know of this advanced beam technology that is used to raise and lower things from this planet into craft. And
yeah, I got raised and lowered by it once, so I do know it exists.
Right, and Jim Sparks and others. But when I asked him specifically about this extraordinary scene of something melting newly fallen snow into droplets and gathering it up into the cylinder that was rising up into the ring with its antenna, this is something that David Smith said. This is a quote. Well, you know, one of the staples of modern warfare is reconnaissance. You have to know your enemy. You have to know how they think, how they move, how they work, what they eat, how they eat, when they eat. I believe these ring drones are the tendrils of some sort of recon force, an expeditionary unit that's going over the target, figuring out what has to be done. That's what frightens me so much. That is the vibe, the feeling that I felt, unquote. Now, very important to remember, he was knocked unconscious. His boots were melted onto the ground, but he was alive. It did not kill him. Perhaps these machines cannot kill life that they encounter. Maybe there is some sort of restriction. And further, he went from that experience into a desire to go into law enforcement. And today, as he talked to me about this memory that haunts him, he is doing so from a context of dispatching and being on the receiving ends of all kinds of calls all of the time. And he told me that he was even aware that in the police station lingo, there is a code. It is for unidentified flying objects. That code was released to his police station and others in January when all of those sightings were occurring in Stephenville, Texas. He said something extraordinary happened, Linda, and we're talking about highly classified and emergency code operations and alphabet soup people being involved. But given all of that and given the fact that now in his work he is paying attention to what is happening with an open mind, he and others in police stations, he said, we are truly left out of the information loop. If the code comes into the police station, that code is immediately passed to higher authorities, and they have a step-by-step operation in which very specific information is to go beyond police stations to some phone numbers that, as far as you and I are concerned, they would be part of the alphabet soup agencies in this country. And I think it's fascinating that here is a young man who had an experience that has so stunned him that when he finally decided he would go into law enforcement, that he now is more aware and has more of an open mind and is trying to understand not only what happened to him, but what is happening in all of these other aerial light sightings that have been engulfing the planet for a long time, and especially now this new resurgence in 2008, not just Texas and other parts of the United States, but definitely an uptick from around the world.
You know, I don't think that it intended to kill him, and I doubt very much that it didn't have the ability to do that. I do think this man was sent back with a message, and the message is basically very clear. You better watch out. Don't tread on me. I am not going to tolerate you doing anything that I don't care for you to do. He was sent back, and it was with a message, and that message is quite clear. And that message tells us something. It tells us that whatever is there is doing or is planning to do something that we will not want, that we will wish to resist, and it is warning us, don't try us on. It's a threat reaction. Exactly what you're seeing is something is threatening us and telling us to stay away. Now, if it couldn't be bested by us in some way, it wouldn't need to threaten us. And that tells us something else. In some way that it knows, and perhaps we don't, it's vulnerable to us. Mm-hmm. We have to think very clearly with this stuff, because if you don't, it'll get you. But so we know that whatever is out there has vulnerabilities, that there may come a time that it is essential for us to understand. And what I think is so sad about the secrecy, which on one level I can certainly understand their thinking and the necessity, what they would view as the necessity of it, but at the same time, it means that people like him and other good, competent thinking people like you and me, people who can think a lot about this and think quite clearly about it, don't really have a chance to add to the human side of the equation. And one of the cleverest things the visitors have done by the way they have presented themselves to us is to put our government in the situation where it's more or less compelled to keep its own counsel as long as it can. On the one hand, this means that the kind of social disruptions that the government fears won't happen. On the other hand, the longer they wait, the more likely it becomes that the visitors will be able to use them just in the way they are hoping, and that is to use them as a means of surprising us, or to enable the visitors to surprise us, because the government kept its secrets for too long.
Right, and he told me that one of the reasons that he finally decided to contact me is that I had said in one of my appeals on radio and at Earth Files that I truly do believe that knowledge gives us strength and that ignorance weakens us, and we can be broadsided so much more easily when we are not prepared with knowledge. And he said that is exactly what I feel, and that's why I wanted finally to tell you the story. He has never really unfolded this story that you have heard except to his father.
Well, it's a great benefit that it has been unfolded to us now, because, you know, it's time, especially among the people who listen to this program and to Coast. It's not a large number of people. I mean, by world standards, it's a big audience, but it's tiny by the number compared to the number of people on the planet. But maybe it's time to start rolling out some real knowledge in hopes of being able to devise a real defense that isn't only hardware-based, but also extends into the social fabric and into the cultural milieu of mankind, so that when this does emerge, it won't be so shocking to us that it basically renders us helpless immediately. Maybe we'll have some sort of a chance if at least some of us are expecting and understand what parameters are here.
Right. And I feel that all of my work as an investigative reporter and TV documentary filmmaker has been with that goal to try to enlarge human thinking so that we're not so shocked, that we're not getting down on our knees to lights in the sky, but we are standing up and saying we're a life form and we have as much right to be here as anything else, and that it's time we got past we're alone in the universe. That is so old and outdated, and maybe that each of these stories that you and I and others keep spreading to the public, that they do add up over time, like water dripping to create a stalactite, and maybe the governments are looking to Mars and Phoenix to be the headline opener. Oh, we have found evidence of life in another world, therefore we're not alone in the universe.
Linda, let's hope so. Thank you very much for a stirring.
The foundation of America lies in the Founding Fathers' involvement with the Age of Enlightenment. It's the Age of Enlightenment that is key here. Yes, there were Masons involved in the founding of America, but they weren't the actual designers of any of American symbols. They are similar because the Masons adopted American symbols, not because they influenced their design. And there is no hidden agenda along those lines. They drew from the classic neoclassical images of the times, and that, of course, goes back to Greece and Rome, when we had some of the foundations of a republic. So America is actually, and I don't think I'm exaggerating here, William, America is the birthplace, the seed, the sower of the great seeds of what you might refer to as the Aquarian Age, where all human beings realize that we're one people on one planet. It is the key and seed to a republic which hopefully the rest of the planet will move towards, instead of the types of, let's just say the type of terrorist, fascist, et cetera, stuff that's spread all over the planet right now.
Bob, help us get inside the head of the Founding Fathers. What were they thinking about spiritually with the founding of America, and how did this influence their choice of symbols?
Well, I think, again, I have to refer back to National Treasures, your DVD, because I'm looking at it right now, and when you see that symbol, the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, there is a statement of profound meaning. I mean, truly profound, because the Founding Fathers basically realized that we were not just physical beings. We were not just physical bodies. We had the component, this immortal and infinite component that goes from incarnation to incarnation, learning how to treat others, the golden rule and that type of thing. And the symbols that they chose there were really obvious from the standpoint that most people thought, when you look at this, that these are Masonic symbols, but they're actually symbols of the Enlightenment. That eye in a triangle. That eye in the triangle basically is providence overlooking the founding of this nation. We were favored in this pursuit, laying the foundations for a republic for the rest of the planet. And, of course, that's a spiritual dimension, the eye in triangle and the providence. But
From Nashville, this is William Henry. This is Dreamland. Welcome, everyone. Forget about all that negative nonsense you've read in those Illuminati conspiracy books about the Founding Fathers and the creation of Washington, D.C. as the center of a bizarre satanic mystery cult. Discovering the true story, the esoteric story of the mysterious founding of America and her symbolism, is far more incredible than conspiracy theorists can even imagine. It leads to a positive appreciation for the potential of the nation behind them and the people of that nation. So believes today's guest, Robert Hieronimus, Ph.D., author of the newly released and highly praised The United Symbolism of America, Deciphering Hidden Meanings in America's Most Familiar Art, Architecture, and Logos. Dr. Bob received his Ph.D. from Saybrook Institute in 1981 for the doctoral thesis and historic analysis of the reverse of the American Great Seal and its relationship to the ideology of humanistic psychology. His popular version of his thesis on the Great Seal, published in 1989 by Intertraditions as America's Secret Destiny, Spiritual Vision and the Founding of a Nation, has been used so widely it's the standard reference work on the subject. In 1988, Bob and his wife Zoe launched 21st Century Radio to further share his research in metaphysical symbolism, the Founding Fathers, America's Great Seal, UFOs, and more of the paranormal. He's been featured repeatedly on the History Channel as well as on the Discovery and National Geographic channels, and he's here now to tell us the true meaning of America's symbols, and his name is Bob Hieronimus. Bob, welcome to Dreamland.
Well, William, what a joy to be with you to talk about this most important subject, because so rarely is one able to talk with a host that knows the importance of the foundation of this country and what it means to the planet, especially since there are so many negative individuals right now talking about perhaps maybe we're being overrun by the Illuminati one way or the other. But, you know, America, as you well know in your incredible DVD, National Treasures, Signs and Symbols of the U.S. Founding Fathers. I mean, you really laid some important foundation work here.
Thank you.
Great images. But the most important thing that I think that most Americans should realize is the key to understanding to partake of those treasures. And of course, it's not going to be easy for people even to find them, especially within the media today.
Bob, we have to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to continue our conversation along this vein, and in particular, I want to talk with you about the concept of liberty as it relates to enlightenment. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Dr. Bob Hieronimus, author of The United Symbolism of America. Bob has a website, the UnitedSymbolismOfAmerica.com. That's UnitedSymbolismOfAmerica.com, and it's loaded with a generous sampling of the book's contents and a fantastic gallery of many of the images that are in the book. Bob, one of the ideas one of the words that gets thrown around a lot today by presidents and other political types is the word liberty. What did the word liberty mean to the Founding Fathers, and does it mean the same thing today? Like, for example, when we talk about bringing liberty to Iraq, does it mean the same thing as it did to the Founding Fathers?
Well, I doubt that very much. It meant the same thing to what we've done over the past 7 years to Iraq. Obviously, I think our president has made a series of bad steps in that direction of war against a nation that really was not part of 9/11, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But liberty, when you think of the symbolism of a liberty, you go back to Greece and Rome and the age of their Enlightenment stages, and we have it manifested in New York's harbor, New York City's harbor, the Statue of Liberty. What is liberty in regards to that particular statue? And of course, the statue has been attacked for various reasons. Some who feel that it is a goddess. Yes, it is a goddess. It is all about the goddess, and it is the divine goddess. And we're not talking about just male, females here. We're talking about that a state of awareness. And when you look at the symbolism of the Statue of Liberty, what she has in her right hand, she has the torch of enlightenment. Enlightenment, obviously, is wisdom. And this particular type of wisdom is being held in her right hand. That right hand is important and symbolically because it is journey, is the key to our evolution in the sense that you come up against something that you don't agree with, you struggle with it, you come to your own conclusions, you discover the treasure within, then you take that treasure and you give it back, that information back to service to others in a way in which it's not about trying to make a living out of it. It is more or less about helping others elevate their awareness. I'm sorry I've talked so long on this, but it is really the key, and I seldom ever get a chance to ever talk about this most important aspect of our Founding Fathers. When you look at Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, you will see he reveals to you about his methods, used by various secret societies of focusing in the morning and focusing and doing a day review at the end of the day, of meditating in the morning and then reflecting back and seeing just how much you improved yourself during that day and helping others. It's really, Franklin really was an extraordinary soul alone. There's like very practical Capricornian consciousness, which I think has been totally missed by most other historians who look at his life and don't realize that he was serious about his, at times, vegetarianism, of looking into beyond our physical being in regards to life after death and that kind of thing. So the Founding Fathers, through the symbols that they chose, talked about balance. And that, I think, is what our nation needs to do today in restoring itself in regards to its destiny. And that destiny is a representative form of government so that all of us can work together as one people on one planet. Yep, that sounds a little bit corny, right? I understand that, William, but it's really the key. But because as soon as we get to planetary consciousness, you know as well as I, the planetary consciousness, as we move towards cosmic consciousness, opens up our heart and gives us the compassion by which we can help others without asking for anything for ourselves. And boy, that's a leap of in the founding of any nation on the planet. And of course, this is, I believe, this is the special nation which had its destiny back with the ancients, whether we go back to Egypt or Atlantis or other lost civilizations. America has refound those treasures and is out actually giving most human beings a chance. The pyramid is the foundation. It is that which William Barton and Charles Thompson would believe would be the physical embodiment of something that would last forever. And that's what they wanted to do. They realized that we have a physical dimension, they realized we had a spiritual dimension, and they were calling them into balance. If there's one key word I would think of in connecting with the Founding Fathers and the founding of this country is balance. And all of America's symbols, not just the reverse of the Great Seal, but the front side of the Great Seal, the Statue of Liberty, the Liberty Bell, the American flag, all discuss this thing of balance. And this allows me to be able to talk about one of the most important things on this show that I can't talk about on most other shows, and that you're well aware of elevating consciousness, and elevating consciousness in the formula of taking the Kundalini life force and bringing it up the Sushumna and balancing the Ida and the Pangala, which of course is reflected, as you well know, in the caduceus that is used by today, the AMA, but tells the whole story about human beings and how they can reach higher states of awareness. Of course, through meditation, through prayer, and service to others is key, but by using these particular symbols, which emphasize balance, because in this all secret societies, everyone that I belonged to, amongst 12 or 13 of them in the past, the main thing was about how does one create balance in one's life so that the spiritual nature can flow into the physical body. It's a science, and it is a science and it is a mystical art to do this. And all secret societies have at their base this formula for elevating awareness. And that is, again, as I mentioned a little earlier, I simplified it, of course, through prayer, talking to the Supreme Deity. That's what prayer can be referred to. It's more than that, of course, but then meditation of listening, of being able to hear that still small voice within, which is really key to guiding ourselves. And in that balance of listening and also speaking, we come to the most important aspect of it, which deals directly with service to humanity. Almost like, you're aware of the work of Joseph Campbell and Abraham Maslow and others who kept saying over and over and over again that the hero's